Yeah, well, Corsi, thanks so much for joining us. Super excited. Dr. Tanya, so many points that you mentioned just stuck out to me. And it just goes to show that the stress and burnout that we deal with, we all deal with stress and burnout, but it's all very, very different.
Exactly.
One thing that stuck out to me is why does it take so long for people to believe us that something's wrong? Like I can't tell you your same experience where my fourth doctor finally said something is actually wrong with your spine. You need to look at it a little bit closer. Everyone else, oh, take an Advil. You probably need just two Advils, maybe a cortisone shot, and I'm going to listen to the people because in my brain, okay, I'm just crazy and I don't know how to sleep. So that stuck out to me. And another thing that stuck out to me is you mentioned that immigration mentality. The immigration mentality and even the American mentality is very interesting. And I learned that from working with LeFel because we have people all over Europe. And when I'm messaging my boss at 9:30 at night, which is normal for me, I'm like, I've eaten dinner, the dog is destroying everything in the floor, I have peace. But she's just like, why are you messaging me? And I'm like, well, I got to get things done. She's like, I'm off at 5. I'm not working the weekends. Nothing that I'm doing can't wait till tomorrow. And I like love that for her because that is such a very, very hard thing to do is taking care of yourself and setting those boundaries. I
Exactly.
am the biggest person, as a people manager, I'm always telling my folks, take time off. You got a headache? You're not going to get anything done if you have this migraine staring at the screen. But then I'm also that person that's up at 11 p.m. doing what I'm supposed to do. So thanks, Sharon. You like got my wheels spinning, and it just goes to show. One more thing you said that your journey didn't stop when you realized your first step wasn't the right one. I know so many people. I know my cousin, for instance, she wanted to be a social worker because she has that passion. She wants to help children. And I will say after 2 months, she was just like, I don't think she's like, I don't think I'm passionate as I thought. But it really was, she's just in a very tough environment that you can't learn inside of a book. You learn that trying to find that child of why didn't you come to that appointment? Why are you 20 pounds skinnier than the last time I saw you? So
Exactly.
all those little check marks and pauses and you realizing that one thing I like to say is it's not a failure, it's failing forward. It's like, okay, this didn't work. What can I do? I fail forward all the time. And I love failing forward because that means like I acknowledge that I failed. Okay, what's next? That's not for me. How can I continuously learn? So thanks so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. I normally don't go
Piggybacking off of
as
that,
often.
if you're an empath, it makes everything worse.
That's what me and Tanisha was just speaking about. And Tanisha, I'll let you share too. But it's like you feel it, even if
No,
you
I
don't.
mean, I was
You
trying.
can
I
feel
sort
it
of
through the Zoom call. You can. I remember one time
no.
I was.
It actually can eat you from the inside. I didn't really know if I should go there, but there's a lot of that. I was, of course, what I was saying was about how I started out neuroscience and I was a therapist and how I failed because I was crying and trying to chase after kids and they're like, you can't do that, and that it was exactly that. I would have nightmares. I couldn't eat. I couldn't function because their pain was coming into me, but I
Mhm.
didn't know if this was the group to say that, but now this is recorded, so here you go.
We haven't even done an
Well,
intro yet,
I
but we'll just
identify.
right into it.
I was going to say I identify. Tanisha and I were talking a little bit about that. My journey is probably very similar to many of us in that I worked juvenile corrections and I worked residential care and I worked public school in inner city, and it was my passion to go into the dark and spread my light, kind of a thing. And I was very realistic. I worked with the worst of the worst, the toughest of the tough. There was nowhere else to send them but me, and we had a ton of success. That takes a toll, and you can't listen to the stories and spend the time with the people and have the soul of the person if you're truly doing what you say you're going to do. I don't believe that you can do that without transference of some sort, simply because of the way humans are set up. We just are naturally, we have hormones that release in tough situations. We have a biological response to other human beings. We are supposed to feel empathy when we see someone hurting. That's something that hopefully we develop by 10. I got a lot of the kids that didn't. And so when you're dealing with that aggression and that violence and that trauma all the time, it doesn't have to be yours to become yours. And so you're then stuck dealing with, and people will say, well, you didn't have a violent childhood. You didn't have, 3 of my babies watched their mothers get shot and killed by their fathers in 3 separate incidents in my career. So you can tell me that trauma isn't mine, but I would argue, yeah, it is. When I care about these babies and I'm in that story with them and I'm helping them come out of that it's all my fault situation, it becomes very much central to who you become as a person. And if you're not grounded, and if you're not healthy, and if you don't have amazing coping strategies that are tried and true for you, you will be diagnosed. You will be misdiagnosed. You'll be re-diagnosed. You'll diagnose yourself. You'll try to make sense of something that feels so nonsensical. And the whole time you're feeling like you're crazy, but then you meet up with other people that are like, yeah, me too. And it's like, oh, my people, my tribe, I'm finally here. And so I was so excited when Tanisha brought this up, because women's wellness has become kind of central to my life. I've actually transitioned into another part of my professional journey, and starting my business is called The Healing Spot. And so it's all about taking personal responsibility for your wellness. So I'm super glad to be here, because mine started out a necessity. I had nowhere else to go. And so I started finding people that could help me. And now I'm offering the services to people in my area because we don't have those things here. So hair follicle testing and, different things that can give people some personal responsibility and ownership over what they're doing. I feel like for those of us that are high achievers and helpers, kind of the best way for me to feel like I've taken some control for myself. So I'm super grateful to be here and to hear everybody's stories and how this all ties together, because I believe we're in the right spot.
Yes, we're in the right spot, and there's so many backgrounds here on the screen, which I'm super excited about. Dr. Latanya, you talked about it eating you from the inside, and was that something that may be relevant? And I think it's good. You don't know what you don't know. And I might just think, do I got the flu? Am I sick? But when you look at it scientifically, it's like, oh crap, that makes sense. And Corsi, like you said, it's like when you get to your people and you get to that doctor that actually wants to listen to you, you're like, oh, literally one of the top responses I hear is, oh my God, I'm not crazy. Like everyone's like, oh, I thought I was crazy. So super excited to just have this conversation and hear you guys' background. But Tanisha, before we get started here,
we've already kind of got started already.
We got started rolling with this conversation. I love it.
It's all good. It is all good, because that's what we want to do here today. It's just an open conversation. So take it away, Zay.
Awesome. Yeah. And just, we kind of broke into the conversation, but just to give us an overview of what we're talking about here is really talking about breaking that cycle of burnout. What does that even mean? And really talking about that mental health behind it, the anxiety, and then also tying it into how can you intentionally use cannabis to help that. That's one thing. Cannabis has been around for a while. It's been super beneficial for a while, but there's still a lot of stigmas out there. There's still a lot of unknowns out there too. And there's so many people that want to transition over, but they still have that hesitation. So super excited to have this panel together to really explore that and talk about, how do women really use cannabis in a mindful consumption while also understanding their own burnout, their own anxiety and exhaustion as well. But before we get started, I would love to just pop around the room, do a quick intro for each one of you guys, if you want to share just a little bit about yourself, and then we can keep rolling into these conversations. But Corsi, I would love to just start with you.
Hi, everybody. So I mentioned a little bit about my background. I work with kids. Those are my babies. The tougher, the better, it seems, through the years. I started at 19 and kind of progressed in all the different areas. I started worst and kind of backdoored it and started getting younger and younger. I retired from teaching elementary. I was a K-5 alternative school teacher here in Waco. So I got all the babies that were kicked out of Waco ISD, and we got to get them reset and get them back in. And I got to do that for a good amount of time. And I got to transition out and do kind of what I want to do. I did all of the, expectations. I've got a doctorate in education. It's technically in leadership. And my background is in criminal justice and psychology, or my first 2 degrees. And so I've always been fascinated with the human brain and behavior and just kind of helping people be better. And so I did that very strategically, working for the state, working for different organizations and things. And throughout time, I've just gotten to a spot where it was like, okay, I want to do this on my terms, in my own way. And I want to do it differently than I've ever done it before. And going along, Tanisha and I talked a little bit about this, but coming off that solid, careful path and being willing to step out, it's so exhilarating, but it hits every fight, flight, freeze response you could ever possibly have. And so it's interesting that when you get to do what you want to do, you're still dealing with the physiological and biological and emotional things that go with the what ifs and all the things that go with it. So I am a happily newly married entrepreneur that's starting a business, and he's starting his business. He's coming out of education after 19 years. And we're just in a place to, I guess, bet on ourselves. Is where I feel like I am. So I'm super excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Corsi. Faith, love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I'm a pharmacist with Ethos Cannabis. Been in the medical cannabis space for about 1.5 years now, and I joined Ethos last July. Before that, I had come from more hospital, retail, pharmacy settings, as well as pediatric. So I've been loving applying that more clinical background to consultations with patients when it comes to using medical marijuana, and kind of tying it all together for them. And coming from the tip of the Emerald Triangle, Humboldt County, California, Ethos was really the perfect landing spot for me when moving to Pittsburgh. So it's been a great transition. I'm very thankful for it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Faith. Bill, love to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. I'm a pharmacist also, and I'm the lead medical professional for Ethos Cannabis, involved in many aspects of the cannabis industry, from day-to-day operations to patient consultations and even research. Currently, we're performing a double-blinded clinical trial with Thomas Jefferson University for patients who are cannabis naive and deal with anxiety. So right at the forefront of cannabis research when it comes to mental health. And I'm very excited to be here and talk about everything we need to talk about.
Thank you so much, Bill. Natanya.
Hi, thank you. So I'm Natanya Wachtel, and I kind of was talking for quite a while before we recorded, just to say I've been a mental health advocate for a long time, working in and out of the field. I'm not currently clinically involved, but I like to help tell stories of transformation, resilience, and truly with the underpinnings of suicide prevention, addiction response, and all of that. But we don't talk about that stuff too much. We mostly talk about how we get through it. And in my process of leaving working in big pharma for a long time in the more clinical way, started to read about studies in my work with soldiers and PTSD, studies about psychedelics, plant medicine, all these other treatment modalities that, quite frankly, I didn't know much about. Because of the life that I was living and the way that I had to function, was like, oh, I don't deal with any of that. I honestly had a bit of bias and stigma. And I also was nervous that if I looked into it, even from a research perspective, or aligned myself, what it would mean or what people would think. And this is only a couple of years ago. I'd say around COVID, I started to feel like I really don't want to do this, but can I? And it started for me with cannabis and plant, and mostly psilocybin, plants and fungi, and looking at them from a scientific research perspective, like Bill and Faith, to see how they were working in the body. Because actually the last big pharmaceutical product I worked on was in the endocannabinoid system. It was the reverse munchies, Rimonabon, Acomplia, but it was pulled. It was supposed to be this big blockbuster for smoking, mental health, weight loss. because people weren't using it appropriately. And so I had my own bias, my own fear, and this idea of people who get high, and not judging that recreationally. I meant medically, I didn't really get it. I'm not proud of that. I'm just trying to be really honest here to say I was a square about it. And then I was like, oh, I get it now. So I just started talking with more people and looking into the studies, and then starting to see what people were doing in other cultures, other places in the world. There are other studies that are, then we are like, duh, this is ancient wisdom. And so as that sort of bloomed for me, I couldn't go back. I couldn't go back to looking at mental health or whole person health as a thing you slap a Band-Aid on when you make a cut and bleed. Or when you step on a tack. I started looking at, how do we pull the tack out? Or how do we think about why we were in a place where we would step on that tack? So that's, to me, what cannabis and other kinds of integrative medicine tools, as well as other kinds of things like photobiomodulation, light therapy, or vagus nerve stimulation, acupuncture, electric, yoga, meditation, breath work, how they concomitantly or together work to create outcomes that heal rather than just mitigate symptoms or mask symptoms. And I think that's what's really exciting about the Western science of today with cannabis, because it's sort of catching up to things that other cultures have been knowing and doing for centuries. And now we can take away some of the shame, some of the stigma, some of the regulations that are blocking us from using all the tools in the toolbox. So that was probably too long of an answer, but that's my answer.
Love it. No, thank you so much, Natanya. Super excited to continue the conversation. And Tanisha, give a brief intro.
Well, I mean, as the founder of Flower Girl, we were super, super intentional in creating an initiative for women's wellness, Women's Health Month, around, that was going to highlight women and wellness and weed all in one space. So I'm super, super stoked that everyone is lending their voices to what I feel like is an extremely important platform where mental health is concerned. It's actually why I started Flower Girl. So just extremely excited that you all have decided to join us and lend your voices to this space.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tanisha. Just a quick one about me. My name is Zay. I am a cannabis and mental health advocate. Been it for quite a bit. I'm also the partnership manager over at LeafWell. Over at LeafWell, we're really focusing on really helping communities get that cannabis care, but also that education behind it as well. So I think back to where I started my career. I started in food service. I was a server. I was grinding, and that has its own craziness. And then I went even crazier, and I said, you know what? I want to work for hotels. I had a passion for events and sales. More crazy, I wanted to add to that. But it was so enlightful for me because I really am a people person. And in hotels, you can have like a simple conference, or you can have a wedding that makes somebody's big day. And I think that's where I really learned that I was a people person, and I was a person that understood some of the struggles people went through. So when I finally became a sales manager and I had my own team, one of the things that I tried to stand firm on is, I was that employee that was burnt out. I was that employee that probably slept in her car so I can be to the next shift in 3 hours. All the toxic things you shouldn't do. So when I became a leader, I said, this is what I'm going to teach my team not to do. With my team, I have a small but mighty team now. And in the past, I'm really big on take your birthday off. Everything will be here tomorrow. We all work remote now. So if we sometimes forget to take care of ourselves. So I'm like, hey, you know what? When's your next dentist appointment? Oh, I think I might have to take off. Nope, just go to your dentist appointment, go get it taken care of. But that's one thing that I really value, that when I became a leader and I came into a space where I could use my voice, I wanted to let people know that, hey, mental health is real, it's there, and it's so many industries and people that just deal with it, but not really solve it and seek the treatment for it. And I spent my time in hotels, I stayed in sales, but I said, if I really wanted to be a cannabis and mental health advocate, I have to step out that lane. And that's where I found LeafWell. And when I found LeafWell, I was like, do you guys just do medical cards? I've got my medical card before, and it was kind of like here's your medical card, have a nice day.
Right.
When I had a list of questions, I'm like, okay, now that I have my medical, they were like, whoa, ask the dispensary. But when LeafWell reached out to me, I said, okay, let's see what it is. And one thing that inspired me and my CEO is they also have that same stories. That our mission is really not just here's your med card and go. I want you to know what to expect when you go into the dispensary. I want to really tailor to different target audiences. I have some of my mentees could be 20 years old and she's just starting up. And then I have my dad who's 72, who just got his medical card, who is hardcore. I will never take a drug, medicine, anything. But it's all about that. The biggest thing is education. And that's something I'm super passionate about because just like me, I was not educated on cannabis. And I'll be honest, I didn't use cannabis for a while. I have an amazing boyfriend now, but back in high school days, I had the boyfriend that just smoked weed all day. And I was like, is that what weed is about? That is horrible. But then I got that education from a mentor that said, hey, you know what? You're talking about your chronic pains, your stress, you're working 14 hours a day. What about cannabis? And I'm like, oh, I got a military family. That's not going to happen. But that education is where I truly learned. And it's talking to individuals like you. It's me really making sure I educate myself, but then I also realize that there's so many gaps in education where a lot of times people are just like, you know what, I'd rather not learn because it's too hard to find resources. It's too hard to find people like you guys on the screen here that actually have that mission to truly help people. And that's why I'm super excited to kick off this panel and really just talk about and explore, how women can be using mindful cannabis consumption while also combating that stress, that anxiety, and that just emotional exhaustion. And I think, especially at a time now, I think we're having a lot of conversations, but I think it's a conversation that we need to address that mental health is here. It's not going anywhere. How do we address it? Cannabis, the community is blossoming. How do we educate folks that we blossom and we continue to do it right? So before we kind of get into the cannabis portion of it, Corsia, I kind of want to start with you, and I want to just talk about burnout in general. And when I think about burnout, I sometimes might think of myself or my mom. I think of burnouts with certain industries, but burnout, everyone has burnout, but it's different. Corsia, I'll use you as an example. You are now a house of entrepreneurs. That is a big step within itself. So juggling careers, we have women that are caregivers to their parents. We have people that are just trying to be a part of society and sit at that right table. So if you could kind of just talk me through, today, what are your thoughts about burnout? How do you see it? And what does burnout mean to you?
I was kind of the poster child, if I'm going to be 100% honest. I am a high achieving, top of the class, outstanding graduate. I am employee of the month. I'm all those things. And I was dying inside. I was over 350 pounds a couple of times in my life. And I was a caregiver. My first husband was diagnosed with cancer 5 months into our marriage, and it was considered terminal. And so for the first 8 years of that connection, it was very toxic, both chemically and in all the different ways. And so I had the caregiver piece. I was working 2 jobs. I had worked to get my doctorate during that time. I had just started my doctorate. I was about 8 months in, I think, when he was diagnosed. And I had a wayward stepson that I helped raise. And I had 2 jobs I was working. I taught collegiately for Tarleton State University in the evenings a couple of nights a week. I was going to school a couple of nights a week. And then I did my 50 hours a week with my teenagers that I was the unit manager for all females. I had 15 staff and 12 girls. Wow. So I was the poster child. I didn't sleep at night. And when I tell people that, I need you to understand what not sleeping at night means. I was not an insomniac. I did not have the inability to fall asleep. I'll briefly tell you, it was a dream, a narrator of the dream, a usually gospel song, because I listen to a lot of gospel. So there was a gospel song playing in the background as all of this was transpiring. The TV was up way too loud as all this is going. And then I would hear dun, 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 and I'm not kidding. Dun, 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 dun. And so that was my every single night. And I would spend 5.5 hours in this in-between state of my body would not shut down. In my opinion, my brain was literally sounding the alarms. It was literally telling me, if you don't do something. And that's ultimately kind of where I got myself. I've had to make some medical interventions for my weight that still didn't stick. I still had to do some other things on my own behalf to take care of those things. And I'll be very honest, when I was going through all of that, because I was overweight, not a single one of my numbers was bad. I was completely healthy. By all standards, I was healthy. And yet I'm dying inside. And people are looking at me like I'm crazy. And I've literally been told that I don't know what I'm talking about. Yet it's me. Aren't I the expert about me? If nobody else knows, don't I know me? And that was so frustrating to feel like all you wanted to do was throw pills at me. They made me take a stress test. It showed that I did not have heart issues, nor did I need blood pressure. But because I was in the 300s, I must be so sick. No, emotionally, I was killing myself. And I had no idea that all of this help that I was doling out to everyone else, there was a cup that had run dry. One of the best things I've ever heard from a lady I did a workshop with, she said, it's not pouring from an empty cup. That's not the deal. She said, my cup has to be so full, you only get whatever can fall out on its own. I'm not tipping my cup for anybody. And when she said that, I thought, oh, that was like life-changing for me. Oh, I'm not even tipping my cup. You can have whatever spills out onto the saucer underneath. Okay. I had never done that before. So I'm in the process of learning that. Tanisha, yes, ma'am.
Well, I was just going to say, I think for me, it's not to jump into your story, but for me, hearing that, I have to put myself first. We as women, we are not socialized to put ourselves first. Everyone comes before us. So even hearing you say that, you know what, my cup is my cup and everybody else has to get what comes from that. Like, it's like foreign to, I can't speak for anybody else, but that's foreign to me because it's like, I've got a 16-year-old I have to deal with. I got a husband that I have to deal with. I've got I've got all of these different people that are pulling from all of these different angles. And it's like, how in the hell do I then stop and say, no, it's just going to be about me. And if you get some, you get some. And if you don't, you don't, but that's on you. And it's like, how do you even make that connection to perform in that manner? I mean, it's like, how does that even happen?
It was so hard for me to even feel confident enough to advocate for myself. And I think I got very angry. I've been very angry with the medical system. I've been very angry with doctors. I've been very frustrated with the process because I am an educated woman and I am familiar and I am trauma informed. I train about trauma. So I'm telling you that I'm familiar with where this is coming from. And they're like, well, go to therapy. That's what I do, right? Like, it's like, okay, been there, done that lots of times. I am therapy 100%. Yes, everyone should. What else, right? And that harm in pharmaceutical, man, the more that I started trying to seek help to try to get myself back to stable. I didn't want to be on medication for the rest of my life.
Another
when
pill.
they told me 4 years I have to be on medication, I'm like, what can I do instead?
Yeah.
Is there some food? Can I change my diet? What exercises can I do? I learned about vagus nerve exercises and they've been life-changing for me in releasing my neurological, just all of the way that my nervous system responds to the environment. I worked in trauma-centered places. I was in the aggression management program at Texas Youth Commission. We had the most violent kids. We were fighting every day, literally every day. You can't live in that environment and think there's not going to be some carryover. And we have human beings that are living in this every single day. I happen to be in the strategic place, but we have babies that are coming into our schools every day walking through this. And so what I learned really quickly was there's some things I could do to make myself feel better. Breathing is number one. I mean, you know, it's that breath work and just understanding how oxygen affects our brain and taking responsibility for that. I could teach babies. I could teach my 5 and 6 and 8 and 10-year-olds how to take personal responsibility for that flare up that happens when our amygdala gets flipped and we feel like we need to fight in that moment, and teaching strategies. In all reality, it's strategy building that we're lacking. Who do we go to? Who's going to teach us, and who's going to be consistent enough to mold it? Because anybody who's trained anything knows you don't just teach it once and say good luck. Right? We need mentoring and people who are going to help with that. Where do we get that? In leadership that's running for money all the time, that's constantly looking to speed this up. The last thing I'll say about this piece of it with the frustration with medical, I just told Tanisha, I've connected with a direct primary care person here in Waco. And the very first time I went to him, I spent an hour and a half chatting about me, my history, what I'm doing with my job, you know, different things. He just wanted to know about me. And in the process of that, I asked him, I said, why did you start this? Like, to be perfectly honest, this is exactly what I've been looking for, because I got dropped by one of my doctors. I got booted to a different insurance. Then I got told I had to apply to be a client, and the doctor could deny me if he didn't want to see me. And I'm sitting here going, wait a second. So I go to this doctor and I'm like, how did you start doing this? And he said, I was slaving away. He's a nurse practitioner. He said, I was slaving away in the ER for, you know, I got tired of getting off at 5 a.m. trying to be a good husband. And he said, I wanted to set this. The thing for me was, if I went into private practice, he said, I would only get 12 minutes with you. And he said, 12 minutes isn't enough for me to be able to do a good job and to be able to make informed decisions. And I thought, oh my gosh, thank you so much. So I set an appointment up for my husband to go to him because he's wanted a better doctor. Go see him. What do you think? He got an hour and a half as well. This wasn't just because I'm a talker, right? My husband got that same amount of attention and got that full history. And I feel completely confident with him as we're moving forward. And like I told him that day, I said, the fact that you spent an hour and a half with me today will allow you to have 10-minute sessions and 10-minute appointments with me in the future, because you've done the work to connect. You've done the work, right? And I think that that's where my frustration has been, just professionally and being a client, is at what point are you willing to do the work? Are you going to jump in here and get dirty with me? Because this is dirty, you know, trying to figure out my health situation. And when I'm not sleeping and I'm irritated and my hormones are all over the place and I'm drenching in sweat every night and I've got all of this stuff going and I'm 33 years old. Help me understand. I need help. And what we end up getting is, oh, eat better. Oh, you need to exercise. You need 30 minutes a day, right? We get these generic views. And it's like, especially if you're the least bit informed, I'm like, don't talk to me like I'm an insult. I'm understanding that I need help with this, and pills aren't it, because every single pill I've ever had has given me a side effect. So that's the frustrating part, just being a consumer, being a client, being on the other side of things. And then working with my clients, I have full empathy because I've lived it, you know, all of the autoimmune diseases. There's no source for autoimmune diseases. I would argue that there is. There's not a readily, easily pill targeted source, but there are absolutely sources for autoimmune diseases when you have been in chaos all of the time and your neurological system is shot. So I think having these conversations with people who understand that it's not just a simple fix, it's how do we collaborate and put everything together to create a plan that works for you as an individual? And I don't know how many people are really doing that these days, as much as it is a one size fits all approach, where I can get as many in as I possibly can to, you know, keep the money coming. And I think that's the frustrating spot when I find people who are willing to listen and say, listen, this is bad, and I know it can get better. And then a few minor changes and it does. Yeah, yes, please. And so being able to connect with people that are willing to listen and offer those suggestions. I will tag this out there whenever I back out. I am in a state that it's not legal. And so I have a different set of challenges, as I will say, in the process of maintaining my own space. So I will add that into the conversation because I know we're a little spread out in different ways.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for sharing that. And so many like learnings and points that you mentioned. And one of the things that you talked through is just the different things that you're doing. So you talked about working those two jobs, being a caregiver, and just those things that just happen in life. If it's a family member gets sick, someone passes away. Bill, we were talking about this and we said, you're not taught that. You're not taught what do you do when your family member passes away? What do you do to make sure that you are keeping yourself sane? You're also making sure you're taking care of yourself while also trying to support other people as well. So that is something that's super crucial. And like you mentioned, it's the listening part. I feel like active listening is very rare. And I always felt, and actually told a doctor this because I knew I wasn't going to go back to him anymore. I had concerns and I had a list of things that I wanted to talk to him about. And I'm that big person I will listen to a doctor if they're listening to me because I came to you because you are the professional. I do not need to be a Google doctor because I have self-diagnosed myself with many things that had nothing to do with me. So I will listen to a doctor. But I also want to be listened to as well. And the thing that I told him is, as a woman, we're managing so many different things. Do you think I can manage all these things, but I don't know what's going on with myself? So that was like one of the things that stood out to me. And that kind of ties into when we're talking about cannabis. And Bill, I want to like turn it over to you to talk about, some of your experience with it and really how can we use that cannabis intentionally and how can we put that in part of our lives of the different things that might pop up?
So that's a big question, but I like it. So a couple parts here. One, the intentional listening, the active listening. It's such an important part on your end and on your provider's end. Like you mentioned and how Corsi mentioned, so many doctors that you deal with, they don't truly listen. They're just trying to get you in, get you out, and throw a pill at you essentially. It's an unfortunate byproduct of the way that the health system is set up, but if you keep at it, you will eventually find a provider that will listen and will help you. Zay, you had mentioned even in the cannabis program, getting your card and you were kind of just sent to the wind, and you see it all the time.
Yep.
You see patients that are talking about their issues with the doctor and they're looking for an answer, and then they're told, okay, now go to the dispensary. And it's unfortunate for a lot of those folks who are brand new to cannabis. They don't know anything about this. They're nervous. There's a stigma associated. There's a lot of negative things going on in their mind, and they need some hand holding.
Yeah.
We try our best at Ethos to help those folks. I don't know how many fall through the cracks, and I've heard the stories of the elderly patient who went to the dispensary with no idea, just got something because they thought it might help, and ended up in the emergency room with a panic attack.
Yeah.
Exacerbating those issues. That's the main thing that we try not to do. We want to start low, go slow, and help those folks with something that could help. But to answer your question a little bit further, and to kind of allude back to something that Natanya said earlier, it's not just one thing. You have to look at it in a holistic manner. So not just medicine. You have to think about mindfulness, as Corsi mentioned. Mindfulness is very important. Therapy is very important. For mental health, we often talk about the trifecta, which is CBT, it's cognitive behavioral therapy. We talk about medication, whether that is prescription, whether it's cannabis or other. And we talk about lifestyle changes, something that will help you, meditation, mindfulness, exercise, yoga. All of those things can work together to help you. Mental health is such a wide-ranging topic. We're talking about mental health like it's one thing. It is a million, and everybody deals with it differently. But if you're able to not only find a practitioner, a PCP, a specialist who can listen to you, but others in your community as well. And like Tanisha's created this community for folks who are like-minded, who are looking for help. All these things come together. And if you're looking to fix an issue that you feel you have, there are ways through it. And you just have to keep at it and keep trying to find the intentional effort that can get you to the end result.
Absolutely. And I love what you guys do at Ethos. And I will say this, when I first started partnering with you guys, you can feel you guys' education and passion behind it. I can't say that for every single dispensary, but you guys really take that time, and it's so appreciated. And sometimes it's just somebody listening, or someone, Corsi, you mentioned it, someone just asking those questions. So I think about when my dad got certified, he was like, gone ho, I don't know why you're making me go through this. But that doctor, he wanted to know my dad. He said, what do you do? Do you walk? Do you bike? Do you like to smoke? Do you like edibles? From that conversation, he realized that my dad is a very high energy person, but he had trouble sleeping. He also was trying to back away from actually using flour. So just from those questions and getting to know my dad, he said, all right, when you go to the dispensary, you really want to lean on that bud tender, but you want to go with some education. Maybe flour is not your best approach. So when you go, I want you to look at just some different edibles, some tinctures. Those are the things that's going to matter for you. Because if you think about someone that does not want to smoke and they say, oh, just go to the dispensary and get some flour, they have a bad experience with flour. It's like, well, that's it. But it's so much that you can do. I think about my neighbor. Me and my boyfriend make our own can of butter. And sometimes it's just as simple as adding that butter to some toast and just actually listening to folks. So love what you guys do at Ethos and what you highlighted there as well.
I'll just, if I could just say too, what you're mentioning with the company, it comes from the top down. The leadership understands that education is key. We make sure to educate everybody on the team so that they're all on the same page. And we have meetings like this month. We have a mental health awareness meeting. Everybody's invited. We're talking about a bunch of very sensitive topics, just like we're doing here. But they're creating a culture of understanding and togetherness so that we can try to help people when they come in with similar issues that we all deal with. I think it's so important, and I commend them. It's not a selfless plug. I don't run the company, but I'm very happy to be a part of it.
And those little interactions just matter so much. Like, I think last time me and Tanisha, we were at a convention together, Women's Grow, and I showed her these new cards I made. They're business size cards, and it's like a terpene cheat sheet. And I give these especially for seniors, people that just need to know what terpenes are. And my dad, he has a plastic one in his wallet, and he's like, okay, I want my carpoline inside of this. And it's also I love to see seniors and people that are new to cannabis that are comfortable. They're like, I know my terps. I know what I like, where I can also lean on you as well. But then we look at the other side of it, where we do have some folks that have that hesitation, that still deal with that stigma. So Natalia, I want to really hear from you, some things that you might have seen in your world with cannabis, using cannabis intentionally, and really breaking through those different like stereotypes and stigmas.
Yeah, sure. I think we've spoken about this in other forums, including, and not to date it, but just to give a nod to, so you should watch them both, where we did whole health panel, right? And we talked about people's reticence or hesitancy because of the way cannabis is delivered to us. Outside of legal and regulatory, but coming out of pharmaceutical, in terms of the way there's sort of like a bottle with a certain amount of pills, and your doctor says, take one of these and you're good, or two, or whatever that is, right? So in cannabis, especially for those who either only used it recreationally or had maybe a bad experience that way, or had through culture or personal experience or religion or any other reason that they felt like it wasn't for them, but then are curious for health, it starts to shift around, well, how much and what do I do? Or they they have all of this almost like another layer of anxiousness around the idea of what it means to use something that has been mostly used ceremonially and recreationally, at least in their purview, in a medical way. Like, how do I know my dose? How do I know my dose for me? And that's how we were also talking about why it's actually exciting for someone like me to think about personalized and precision medicine. And I come from genomics and gene typing and all this kind of high-end science, and then bringing that into cannabis as a mindset around, well, aren't you, Faith and Tanisha and Bill and Zay and Corsi and I, don't we all have different physical bodies?
We do.
And maybe different things going on with our bodies and how we metabolize things, or what our nutrition intake is like, or what other diseases we may or may not be working through. And so, or what our daily environment is like. So maybe we need something different, and to be okay with the fact, and I know Bill's dying to say, try and go slow, to be okay with the fact that you might have to approach this with a different approach than you might your little bottle of pills. But what you get by doing that is something uniquely tailored to your body system.
Right.
And what it does then is it works within your cells, within your hormones, as we were talking so much in the other panel about the research, even doing things like helping with inflammation and cancer and all of those things, and menopause, such that it is tailored to you and what feels right for you. And we're talking about, if you want to make sure that you can function in a certain way safely, do your job right, take care of children, those kinds of things. Those are really common things that I know I myself struggled with in terms of how to connect with it, but also when I talked with other people who were new to it. And I think taking away not only the stigma and the shame of the idea, but the fear around, well, how do I know what's for me? And so that's why I'm really appreciative and grateful to people and organizations like Ethos and Leaf Well and others who take the time to break it down for people to not. It's kind of like when you go to the store and you think, I need some cereal, and then you go to the cereal aisle and there's like 50,000 cereals, and you're like, wait, I don't even know is like which one is these 75 Raisin Brans. So to kind of open up the discussion to even that level of a step, because as someone who works in behavior change too as well, it's like, that's a barrier. That's a barrier that I think is part of it. It's not just stigma and regulations. It's, where do I start? And I think thinking about it as a medicine that you're going to tailor to your body in this time of your life, and working and trusting and being honest about what's going on in yourself, and then having the patience to kind of tinker, that's kind of the magic of it. But you have to be open to that. So that's my answer, I guess, for that.
Love it. Nope, that was perfect. Thanks so much for sharing that. And it, like you and Bill said, it's just really making, and it goes back to listening to ourselves. We know exactly what we like and what we don't like. We know what our body likes and what we don't like. So one of the things that Faith, I want to go to you next, because for you and Bill as pharmacists, you guys are really having those one-on-one conversations. And as people use cannabis as a stress relief, one of the main things a lot of people are concerned about is that dependency, or using it as an escape. What can you tell us, or some advice you might have given some folks for just that mindfulness consumption, instead of, I just want that edible to knock me clean out and eat 12 pizzas?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of people lean on cannabis, or have hopes to lean on cannabis for stress management and anxiety relief. But I get a lot of folks that are still in the workforce that deal with it at work, and they're concerned that they might be too cognitively impaired. And so they need something that will help, because, they feel like their anxiety meds are either intolerable due to side effects, or just simply not working, which are two very common and real issues. So I think that is a big hesitation. So whether you want to call it escapism, or, just feeling too high, for lack of a better word, I think that usually the advice I give them is, again, to start low and go slow, and really fine tune that dose, which is usually easier to do with a tincture, because you can really be precise with the amount of THC and CBD you're utilizing. And I think that even just suggesting that is kind of a newer concept for many people. They see tinctures and they've heard the word, but they don't really know what it is. They usually think of cannabis as either smoking or vaping or the common consumption methods. So I think just even educating them on the amount of products that are available to them, and then diving deep into the different terpenes and cannabinoids and how they're each going to play a slightly different role and interact with each other and help balance out those effects with one another. You know, the whole entourage effect is so important. So it's been really fun to be able to give them the education and pass it along to them so they can really understand what the products are doing for them and how they're working within their bodies. Because I think that they're more okay with the trial and errors of maybe things don't work out the first couple times you buy a product, but since they have that understanding and they're keeping track of what is in it, they have more control and they're more open to trying again, which I think is awesome because they don't get that with pharmaceutical medicine. They understand, okay, this medication is called XYZ, but beyond that, they don't really know what it's doing to them and all the different ways it's affecting them. So that's another thing I love about being at Ethos, as Bill mentioned. We really try to drive that education from internally to externally and give patients the power to understand what they're doing. And I think it allows them to be more intentional with their use, and they don't use it to escape or really to have this leisurely experience necessarily. It might turn into that, but you know, they're able to use it very intentionally and use it in the workplace even without getting that cognitive impairment because they're understanding how each component of it is working.
Exactly.
Love that.
Zay, can I add something to that with Faith?
Yeah,
Just
go for it.
being a connoisseur and on that side of thing, I will say as a 45-year-old woman, my experience with flower happened at 19, was the first time I ever tried it. I was well into college before I ever tried it. And I went into social services. So we were drug tested at every turn. So for 15 years of my professional life, that was not a part of, nor could it have been if it was something I so chose to do. It wasn't until I mentioned I was in that space of not sleeping. My then husband had been given some flower from someone who was trying to help him with some of his chemo side effects. And he said, I really think you need to try this. You're on Christmas break, you know, just give yourself some time, you know, if it doesn't work, whatever. And I slept for 6 hours that night. And I remember waking and I thought I had slept for 60. It was like for the first time I slept. And I remembered what that felt like. I used to actually sleep. And I remember at that moment having to make a decision because, as I said, it's not legal here. So, you know, making that decision can be very, very difficult for people, especially in my age range where, you know, we had a joint or a doobie or whatever it was when we were younger, you know, in the rebellious stage. But no one really knew where it was coming from, what it was. You know, we're close to Mexico, so it was kind of that Laredo, you know, pathway. And that was all you knew about. And I remember getting back into it. I think I was 38 whenever I started again and learning about indica and sativa and hybrids. And like, I just was inundated and overwhelmed. And I'm an educated person, but that entire arena for someone who's just getting started, especially if you've received any kind of negative, anything related to it can be so overwhelming to come into that. So it's wonderful to hear the education. And like I said, for me growing up, flower was the only option you had. And there was one type and it was, you know, usually, you know, red hair or whatever happened to come in. And so now you're in a place where it's medically and the dosing and all of the different things, it's a whole new world. And so for someone who feels drawn or their gut kind of says, I think I should do this, it's wonderful to know that there are people and ways that you can get information to make sure that you don't have to have bad experiences. Because there are people who do have those bad experiences. And, you know, to minimize that, for me, on my side of things, it's all about making it better, not worse. So to hear that all of the professionals on this panel are actively working in that way, it just makes my heart feel good, because I was one of those people that came in on the backside going, what? How much? I mean, I walked into Planet 13 and was like, I've never done this before, right? So I just want to throw that out there. Coming back in, as an old person, and trying to take some just personal responsibility, utilizing cannabis in my own wellness plan. It's been wonderful to be able to talk with educated people and to be able to get that information and not feel crazy, not feel like I'm, lame or whatever. And asking the questions about the chemicals that we're putting into our body, the products that we're putting into our body. It's incredibly important for us to know those things. So thank y'all for providing an opportunity to make it personable, to say these are the people who can answer your questions. And there's more people like y'all out there in the field that are really taking this seriously and understanding that there are some really positive benefits if you're so chosen and so led to walk down that path. So thank y'all for doing that and taking that seriously. Just as a connoisseur, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And it goes such a long way. And, one of the things that our new initiatives at LeafWell is we're actually reaching directly out to employers and different union groups to really tell them, like, cannabis is not going anywhere. So let's educate you and educate your people, because, one of the examples is we signed up the teachers union in New Jersey. Teachers are still going to use cannabis. Lord have mercy, they might need it more than anyone.
Exactly.
But we also, and that's an opportunity for that union, that teachers union or that school to be like, you're using it, so this is what they're suggesting, or them also getting it out of their own stigma and understanding it. Because it's not just about, we don't want every single person to use cannabis. It doesn't work for everyone, but we do want people to be educated about it. So kind of like getting close to the closing. One thing, Natanya, I want to jump to you. Talking about, and this, Corsi, you kind of inspired this question too, is how can women really create that type of self-care ritual, or really just slow down for a second, especially when they're already stretched thin? What is some of the rituals or things that you think is best, whether if it's mindset or physical, where they feel like, I'm already stretched thin, how can I take care of myself? We all want to say, go take care of yourself, but we're all bad and we need that starting point. So Natanya, I would love to hear from you on that part.
Okay, thank you. Great question. I'm going to answer, hopefully not in an annoying way, but in an authentic way, which means I'm not going to really answer that. But I'm going to say, because there's not one way. Mm-hmm. And when I talk with a girlfriend or like a corporate client or partner in our organizations, and if that either comes up organically or not, I like to think about who they are and what's reasonable and appropriate for them. Mm-hmm. So when we think about people who are caregiving all the time and they're just giving, right? And they're stretched in that way. Sometimes all I can say is, like, maybe you can go into the bathroom for 5 minutes mm-hmm. and just do some breath work or put on a song that really makes you feel good. And I do a lot of this 1 minute mindset. It's kind of my little shtick, and I give out little timers around. Can you do anything for a minute? And just maybe it is something as simple as some breath work. This past weekend, we did a nonprofit wellness fundraiser called the Heroes Recharge for first responders, fire, and police. And there were female officers there, and it was at a yoga place. And I have to say, my bias, different kind of bias. I was shocked because these women who looked like they did yoga were like, I've never been in a yoga thing before, female officers of all different ethnicities, backgrounds, types, everything. And I was like, well, just be open to it. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter how you move. If you can't do all the moves, it doesn't matter if you pass gas, like, just that you're here I'm so thankful. And they came out, and a lot of people, men too, were crying, were just looking different, holding their bodies differently. I was like, oh, you get it now. And so we're trying to bring things like breathing, mindfulness, taking a moment, go to the salon if that's your thing, like whatever your thing is. But everyone can probably think about one moment in their childhood, in their life, where they felt free and light. And so when you hold that in your mind, you start to literally feel free and light. and you breathe into it and you bring that feeling alive and you think about what were the smells, what were the sounds. And so I basically say we got to trick our brains to be happy sometimes, but you can do it. And it doesn't have to cost anything. And it doesn't have to mean you take a trip, because if you take a trip and you don't work on that, you're going to just take all your stress to the trip.
Yeah.
And I mean like a vacation or a whatever, right? So cannabis or psychedelics or other things that work within our body and our consciousness, they enhance what's already going on. And that's why that preparation, as Bill and Faith and you were talking about, around why you're taking this, how you're taking this, and being open to, I want to feel this. That's part of it to me. It's a priming. And so my answer is sorry that it's not clean and easy. It's what feels good for you. Like if you ask that person, and sometimes people don't know how to answer, and that's okay too. And sometimes it's like, do you just want a hug? Some people don't want to be touched. I learned that the hard way accidentally. Hungarian ambush. I had to learn like, oh, not everyone wants touching. So that's why I say a complicated way to say is it's really individual. It's kind of like the personalized approach to cannabis. It's a personalized approach to self-care. But more important is to recognize when you need it and to activate and empower those who you trust to be able to help you check yourself before you wreck yourself, which was how we started this conversation before we recorded. And that's what I do, because I need sometimes someone else to check me before I wreck me. And sometimes I've gotten a lot better about recognizing it within myself. And sometimes it literally is 1 minute that I run away and lock myself in the bathroom because that's all I have.
I love that though. And I love your answer, because I think everyone that's watching this needs to know that it's not a one-stop shop. Like everyone says here, your first cannabis experience, you might say, okay, I don't like flower. That doesn't mean give up. You might not like a certain terpene. I know I used to love myrcene because I loved how it made me feel. It helped me sleep. And then the more active I got, I was like, okay, well, maybe I need to switch over to some sativa or carpylene, filene, whatever that may be. So I love that you shared that. It's just knowing that it's not a one-stop shop, and also just knowing you. And knowing that it doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes, me and my boyfriend, one thing I really love about us is that we do have our boundaries. And it's like, he's in the office doing his thing, doing music. I might just be sitting there reading a book. My friend, she's hilarious. But I love this boundary. She's like, when I go into the bathroom with my phone, no kids knock on this door. This is my time. I'm going to scroll, do whatever I got to do in this. Don't come in this bath. But that little thing matters. And, I moved to Vegas from Maryland, and it was mostly because my small thing is sunshine. Like 110 degrees sometimes, but I call it my vitamin D walks. I'm like, okay, slam the laptop, vitamin D walk, and come back. So loved your answer of just not a one-stop shop. Get to know yourself too. Oh, Natalia,
do you mind if I add one more thing? I just kind of came to me when you were talking. I don't want to do like self-promotion here, but I am working on this book that's called Talk Dirty to Your Brain. And one of my chapters is towards the end. And I think this is actually a tip, I guess. I'm really hesitant to give tips, right? But it's kind of funny and silly, but it's about trauma. So it's a little rougher than like, how do you take a moment? And I often say, if you took like some of your most embarrassing, disgraceful events that you feel like shame or guilt about or frustrated about, and had to retell it to someone as if you were a really maybe raunchy, maybe whatever, but raw stand-up comic, and reframe it that way and put it in the past tense. So like, wow, did I really mess that up? You know what I mean? And then you start to re-look at it and kind of laugh at yourself and be like, well, it happened, but I'm here. So let's go forward. And I'm oversimplifying it, but it is kind of a fun trick. So I guess I want to throw that one out there too, because, it's helped me. I hear it now in myself. I was like, well, that was horrible. You know what I mean? And then you kind of keep going.
To piggyback off of that, Natalia, I say for my book, I have a couple of little catchy things. Sorry in advance, but one of my chapters is feelings, those lying hoes. And it's basically the idea that those feelings change, and we get to create them, and we get to stop them, and we can change them, and we are in control of those things, and we don't have to be a victim to whatever's going on. So I absolutely love your book. The one thing I would add, Zay, even though you didn't ask me directly, but I'll kind of throw it in there. One of the other chapters is get sick of your own shit. And so you have to acknowledge that a change has to happen. Until it stinks and until it gets real cold, you'll sit in it. You will, because you were comfortable enough in it at one point. So until you get to a spot where you're like, okay, that's enough, something's going to have to change. Mine for me was the breath work and breathing. And as Natanya said, it's a 7 by 8, and it's basically an 8-second breath. Inhale for 4, exhale for 4. And what research has shown is that if you will do 7 of those, it's about 56 seconds, so less than a minute, you get a full brain reset. Whatever was going on, whatever.
And blood pressure lowering and telomere expansion and all the other feel good, like you said, it's like these simple things actually heal you from the inside out. Right. They cost nothing.
Nothing. There's no cost to it.
Equipment, there's no special injections.
Nothing. And I'll say for mine, the add-on piece of the breath is taking personal responsibility. And knowing when everything's tight and it needs to be relaxed, and to be able to be mindful of that. Journaling was a huge piece of that. Grounding, putting my feet in the grass and just being in nature. The things that make my soul happy. If I do those things consistently enough, I don't need a lot of extra. If I can get to that center point, that balance point, then if something comes and knocks me one side or the other, I got my stability. The problem is if I'm not stable and I don't have that centered point, when life starts coming and knocking me down, I'll find myself on the ground cussing and fussing, but I don't know which one hit me this time or last. And so that's kind of where a lot of us find ourselves. So being able to get to that centered grounding point, and having that space to do it is so important. And being able to communicate that to the people around you to say, I need this time. I can't talk about this right now. Being able to take self out of it and giving grace, not only to yourself and to others, is so central to everything that Natanya said and everything that we're talking about today. It's really getting sick of it and saying, that's enough. Something's going to have to change. Well, the something is you. And the beautiful thing is you get to, you're the creator of your life. Yeah. So if you don't like it, you get to change it. And it's as simple as making a choice. So in all of the decision making, we still get to make the choice. And what a beautiful thing that is.
Absolutely. And I kind of like that ties into something that one of the theories that I learned very early on from one of my mentors. I can't think of the name where he got it from, but it's the glass ball, rubber ball theory. With the glass ball, rubber the ball theory, he broke it down to me and he was like, you're going to keep juggling stuff. That's just what it is. But everything is not a glass ball. You think about all the stuff that you're juggling. If you drop that glass ball, your mental health, family, whatever you want your glass ball to be, it's going to shatter. You can try whatever super glue you want. It's going to be hard. Those rubber balls, those are some things that we might think are glass balls, but they'll bounce back. We'll get to that email tomorrow. We'll get back to that phone call. I know I love my dad, but he wants to talk to me about the Met Gala outfits. I'm like, Dad, I will have time for you at 7 p.m. This is my Flower Girl and Ethos time, and just really setting those boundaries. But that's one big takeaway that was like an eye opener for me. I'm like, you know what? Everything is a red zone today when it shouldn't be. So that's like one of the things that I really love. And kind of to wrap us up, I want us to kind of go around the room and I want to just hear from everyone, for folks that are watching this, what's one takeaway? What's one thing you want for them to stick with? And Tanisha, I'm going to start with you actually.
Well, I'm going to say that my purpose in putting Elevate Her together was to provide a platform where we could have these conversations, these open, honest conversations, provide some insight for those that, are new on this journey or for those that just don't know. And so I feel like I want individuals to walk away with the sense of, again, the community, the Flower Girl community exists because you need to have that community. You need to have that sisterhood. You need to have that space where you can come in and say, hey, I'm dealing with this. What's your experience with this? What are your thoughts are? Have you tried this terpene? What does mindfulness look like to you? There's so many aspects to the community. So just wanting those that that are tuned into the conversation to walk away with the fact of knowing that you're not alone in this, and there is someone on this journey that you're on that has either experienced it, will experience it, or is currently experiencing it in the moment. So just knowing that you're not alone and there is a space that you can commune, and there's a sisterhood there for you to support you. So that's my takeaway from Elevate Her in general. So
Love
just
it.
extremely glad and grateful that you guys are lending your voice to this platform.
And thank you for giving us this space, because if you didn't, it's just going to stay in our brains. A lot of
Right.
stuff, we all are filled with so much experience and knowledge, but if we don't have a platform or anybody to talk to, it's just staying in our brain. So Faith, I want to move to you, especially you as a pharmacist. You talk to people on a day-to-day, you know, what is a takeaway you want someone to have?
Yeah, I think that for me, like in pharmacy school, I really struggled with burnout. And I think that I struggled with it a lot longer than I even recognized. And it took me kind of hitting rock bottom with it, honestly, to recognize the problem and having to get myself out of that. And I think what I'd want someone to tell me at the time is that it's okay to pause. It's okay to not be perfect. And, you know, taking care of yourself is a form of productivity. And I think that's really the key component I needed to hear, because nothing was really going to get me off of the rat race and the hamster wheel at the time. And I think hearing that like self-care is a form of productivity and opening up myself to those mental health conversations in a system that glorifies burnout would have been really helpful. So, you know, now as a pharmacist, having gone through burnout, along with many things that come with burnout, I feel like it is somewhat my responsibility to talk about mental health and normalize these conversations, even when it's not a typical textbook thing. So that's what I would like to share.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Faith. And just to highlight, you know, Faith and Bill, you know, these are the people that want to hear you. And I think it's important for folks to know that we do have people out here, because a lot of times it's like, okay, I've had 3 bad experiences. No one's going to listen to me. That's it. But this clearly shows there's people here that are passionate, that want to help you. So thanks so much for sharing that, Faith. Corsi, I'll go over to you.
I would just offer to be your best advocate. Don't wait for someone to save you or for someone to have your experience, because they won't. They're trying to save themselves. It's not personal. It's just we have to take personal responsibility for each component of our lives. And I think if you're willing to do that and have the honest conversations, oftentimes in the mirror, with yourself and your younger versions of yourself that helped you to get here and to be in this place, I think you can find the empowerment that comes with having a voice. And especially as women, so many of us were taught to serve and be quiet. And that is how we receive so much of our praise. And so the suffering of being a woman oftentimes was not only modeled, but it was required through grandmothers and aunties and mothers and things like that. And that nobody before us really had that self-care mentality and gave permission to be able to do those things. So being able to be an advocate to say, I don't have that in me. I am not capable of being my best self today. Taking personal health days, mental health days, and being able to admit that everything isn't okay is the way that we change it. And until we're willing to do that, we're just going to be going down a very dark hole. And so I'm all about the light. So you might as well speak your truth and ask for help. And if that person and that organization isn't it, there's somebody else who is. Just keep asking and put that intention out, and it will find you, and you will find your right spot in your tribe. So don't give up, and be your best advocate and be your only voice, because it does matter. People will listen if you're willing to speak.
Yep.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think, like Corsi said, keep your ears to the ground. Communicate with folks. If you need help, ask for it. You know, and like you said, it's just something could be so small, that mental health day. One day I took a day off and I slept for 5 hours and I was like, oh my God, I didn't get nothing done today. I'm like, what? I did get something today. I slept. I slept and didn't touch an email. So taking care of yourself, asking for help, and just knowing that the help is out there is so crucial. So thanks for sharing. And Natanya, you want to close us out?
Sure. I just want to thank Tanisha and everyone on the panel for being so candid and open today about our personal experiences, our professional approaches, and just saying that what you're building, Tanisha, legitimately as just another human being, as a mom, as a female, as someone in the new in the community. I love all the things of what you're doing, bringing companies and brands together, bringing women together, men as allies who support us. It's really great because it's kind of rare. It's a championing of all kinds of different kinds of people to learn about each other, to learn about culture, to learn about cannabis culture in a different way, with an elegance to it, with a rawness to it that we just don't see anywhere else. And I'm just so excited to be a part of this. And I just want to thank you. And really, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you guys for just sharing just your viewpoints, your expertise, your stories. I always like to say sharing your stories are hard, even if you got through it, because you're reliving it. So the fact that you guys are comfortable and willing to share your stories, it really means a lot. And, when Tanisha was talking about the panelists, I said, you know what? I want to have all walks of life, different type of people, because no matter what, we all have burnout. We all handle it really differently, and we all handled it probably badly before, and we needed help. So thank you, everyone here on the panel, Tanisha, Bill, Corsi, Faith, Natanya. You guys are truly inspiring.
And say thank you.
Oh, thank you. You guys aren't just using your voice. Like, you guys are really changing things, and it's very easy to not say nothing at all. And you guys are doing the opposite of that. So just wanted to appreciate you guys. Tanisha, thank you for giving us this space and continuously keeping this conversation open.